Welcome to the Lift OneSelf podcast. I am your host, Nat B. Listening with an open heart allows us to relate to another's journey, opening up our minds to insights that help us reflect on our own life. In every story, you can find a glimpse of yourself in the details. I appreciate you being here. Welcome to the Lift OneSelf podcast, Krista. I'm very thankful you're here with me.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I want to take a moment and have a moment of silence for the Indigenous with the discovery of the 215 children from residential schools. I just want to hold a space to give reverence and acknowledgement. Thank you for that. How is your heart doing?
In relationship to the discovery of the unmarked grave for the Indigenous kids, it's been really heavy. It's just another reminder that we need to do better as a country for our Indigenous communities. Yeah,
it's not that long ago. Like it was in the 1800s it started. Yet I think the last one in Ontario was closed down in 1990.
Yeah, and today I read an article where a Conservative MP had called it a stain on Canada, like an unfortunate stain. And I was so mad at that description because it really, it suggests that Canada is, this beautiful, virtuous country that has this like horrible thing in it, and really it's the fabric of our country that needs to change, and statements like that don't recognize that at all. So so I hope that the discussion can move towards like really just unbuilding our country and then building up in some other way.
Yeah, I also recognize media use these taglines to ignite energy. The distasteful energy it brings to those that are living in the experience and disregarded, made to feel like as if it's shameful or not really acknowledging the whole space of it. Things that we need to acknowledge and enter into some uncomfortable conversations. History has to be retold. That is the biggest part of Canada, that it has to be retold, and not the ones that won or were in power. Because those that are in power, they hold the narrative of the story, yet it doesn't mean it's truth. Like you said, deconstruct and rebuild it back up so that we have understanding of the whole story, not just those that hold the narrative and the power of it. First, I'll let the listeners know, I met you through my sister, and my sister is incarcerated right now. We had a discussion because you were intrigued on doing a documentary in regards to BIPOC female, what her story is, but her story is one of many that are just silent, and you wanted to amplify that. And I thank you for that. It takes a lot of courageous work to advocate in art. So thank you for that storytelling. It's really important. What got you into art?
Filming? Oh, goodness. I was a teenager and I had grown up in a family who was very much, you will go do sciences and you will get your degree and then you will, and that is the path that you will be on. And I had a schedule and a scholarship to go to Dalhousie University in Halifax, and little 18-year-old self was just in tears. And my gymnastics coach at the time was just like, Krista, you love art. Why don't you go to art school? So I had never really considered it before. And I mean, we live in a country that doesn't really value art in the same way as other parts of the world. And, but, I showed up at the art school with arms of high school art and put them out on the table in front of them and begged my way in. I had already missed the deadline. So they gave me a chance. And I really, through art, found a way to have a voice and a way to understand the world. And I'm really thankful for kind of going that path.
Can you share a little bit of what you discovered throughout your art and how that became the vehicle of you being able to advocate?
I think art can, function in really different ways, depending on what kind of art you make. It can be illustrative. It can, explore shape and form, or it can advocate. And the way that I have come to use my art as like a tool to understand the world around me. So the process that I go through of, walking through the world becomes the research for my art. Lately, I've been kind of using performance and video as a way to look at how we can care for the world around us. And almost like in the way that ritual can change the way that we relate to other things. And so these kind of like artistic gestures, I've been working through, like how can you use art as a way to shift your relationship to the world around you? And in that shift, is there any possibilities to live better together, to live better on this earth?
And so art allows us to go into those uncomfortable perspectives, because we have a tendency to have a bias of thinking the world is only seen through our eyes and our experiences. And if you don't have a curiosity to want to go beyond that, it can be very challenging. And I think art allows that exploration and expansion of awareness, to be aware, and in a way that doesn't feel, because like our, the ego and our biases are a really intelligent defense mechanism. So as soon as we feel offended or there's something uncomfortable, like we shield up. And art allows that those defense mechanisms don't go up, so that you can still be able to listen. So you explained it very well, of helping others to expand their self-awareness. My main intention is to empower people to stand in their own truth. One sentence that you gave me that really stood out was understanding oneself as connected to everything. And that's with the environment, that there was something that shifted in you. Instead of, the small little, I'm going to do plastic, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. You really felt it in your bones, like you said, in a cellular way of knowing that we're all connected. Like intellectually you understood it, yet something shifted and it dropped into your heart and into an embodiment of really knowing what this means. Can you explain how that feels and what created the shift?
Yeah, that was a shift from moving from the city. I grew up in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I moved up to Dawson City, Yukon, just to get my intention was only to stay for a few months to work on some art, to get away from the city for a bit. And I really, it affected me in a really profound way. I ended up living in the woods. I was in a wall tent, which is, a half plywood, half canvas with a plywood floor living situation. And it was small, probably 10 by 10. And so the paths to the outhouse or to my fridge, which was a hole in the ground covered with plywood, and there was a cooler inside, the permafrost keeps it cold. Those became part of my home. So those pathways were hallways. The picnic table by the garden was my living room. And that blurring between inside and out really, really restructured the way that I lived with the space around me. I had gone to Dawson for the summer and ended up staying through the winter, and moved into a cabin that had proper walls and a wood stove. It's off grid. There's no way to access water, especially when everything's frozen. So you melt snow every day. And I would wake up in the morning in the dark and go outside, fill up my pot of snow. And it takes a lot of snow to make a pot of water. But this was like a constant practice of getting snow and melting snow and getting snow and melting snow to, wash your dishes with or wash your body with. And so I was living with the elements around me in a way that I had never done in the city. You become dependent on them, you listen to them, you see them in a different way. I don't know. I can't describe it any other way except for it changed me from the bones out. I became part of the land around me, and it became part of me. for lack of a better explanation. That really changed. Before, when I first moved to the Yukon, it felt like this pristine, or maybe that's not the right word, but this like kind of vast wildness that was disconnected from everything. But after that experience, it reformed the way that I understood the world. And even though I was so far away from home, because I was connected to the land, because my actions have impact on the land, I could kind of trace that connection back to home.
I love seeing you reflect, because you're in your memories and you're really navigating the visceral feeling. I can only imagine what catching water and chopping wood really is, really having to be in the sustainability of the elements and coming out of that modern habitual way of everything coming very easily accessible, and you're actually having to work and really access back those survival skills that we have.
Yeah, there was like other things too, like the 24-hour daylight. I realized this in the summer when the sun doesn't set. I realized this like huge stress was lifted off me when I realized that when I was in the city and when I was down south, I was always chasing the sunset. I was like, I had a to-do list and I had to get it done by the time the sun went down. And if I didn't finish my stuff for the day, then, I, did not have a productive day. And whereas, all of a sudden I'm up north, I'm, gardening at midnight, it's still sunny. And then it's like, oh, my body's tired. Like maybe it's time to go to bed now. And I started to listen to my body more too. It just lifted those kind of like constructs that we put on ourselves in terms of like, what is a worthwhile day?
Yeah, beautiful. When did you start becoming drawn to the Indigenous culture?
Dawson City was a very different situation in terms of like the way that Indigenous culture is embedded in the day-to-day life, different than it is in Halifax. And I can only speculate why. Contact happened later. The First Nations were able to have land claims and self-governance. And there's a real sharing of knowledge, I feel, in Dawson, the Yukon. It's not without, obviously, it's historical problems as well. But yeah, it was kind of living in Dawson and also living in a way that was really aligned, I think, in some respects to the Indigenous cultures, and those things that I was going through, where my understanding of myself in the world, how those were shifting. I think those were shifting kind of in parallel ways to some things in Indigenous cultures that were really incredible.
Can you recall when you started becoming drawn to the Indigenous culture?
I guess this is a hard question to answer because I don't know if it's a specific moment.
Okay.
I know that it became stronger when I moved to Dawson, was able to kind of understand through different festivals and community events a little bit more about Indigenous culture. I think that, the Indigenous culture is so embedded in the way of life in the Yukon. And I really truly fell for the North. I think it's impossible to separate the two. As I spent time up north, and as my work began to shift to focus on the land and relationship with the land, there were certain things about Indigenous culture that really paralleled the way that I want to live on this world, with this world. For example, I did a project up in the Alaska's Arctic Refuge. It was a project to push back on oil exploration and drilling. And it was in solidarity with the Gwich'in efforts to kind of get oil exploration and drilling off the table. I was up in the refuge and I was with my Gwich'in friend who was teaching me some of the language, and he himself was learning it. And I was so taken by the way that, for example, the word chair, instead of saying, my chair, the translation would be more on top of it we sit. And it was relational and it was about actions instead of like nouns that you can own. I just think that's so powerful, like to walk through the world, understanding things in terms of actions and relationships. I mean, I think we should change the English language and use words that are more relational. So yeah, I think that there's just a lot of power and possibility in the way that the Indigenous culture is lived, and yeah, I'm drawn to that.
When you got to Dawson, did it feel like you had landed home?
Oh, that's a funny question. It's you could go to. I've gone to places in this world and felt like, oh, I know this place. And I've gone to places where it's like, this is nice to be here, but I'll move on. And Dawson was definitely one of them. I got there and it was like, oh, I feel like this is a sky I'm supposed to be under or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe that there are certain environments that you just feel the real connection. And you feel very expansive and you have this sense of, I'm home. I have this sense of belonging internally, and the frequency of the land and the environment just have me on a really high vibration, which is a really great sensation to have. When you got into art, did you ever think that you would be using it as a vehicle for advocating?
No, I mean, when I got into art, I didn't know what art was for or how I could use it. It was, kind of, I think probably in the way a lot of teenagers get into something. I don't think you really fully understand what something can do. And when I would say, found my voice in my artwork, it happened parallel to coming out as queer. And art gave me a way to try on my new identity, to understand the kind of history that it comes with. That was really powerful. And I think in that I found my voice, and it was just kind of a progression into, when you're in your 20s, you're learning about yourself. And as you get older, you start figuring out the world around you a little bit more. And I think as I shifted from understanding myself, art did become an advocacy tool.
What are your largest takeaways from being in the art environment and advocating?
That it's not easy, that there's not a clear path forward. There's not a clear right way to do something or wrong way to do something, but that it is a way that you can engage in really complicated discussions in the world. It's a way where you can, unlike the scientific field that has so many guidelines and so many ways that you have to proceed forward, you can kind of do anything with art. So I think that there's a way to try things out and to discover things within the world through art in a really free way. So I would say that is maybe my biggest takeaway.
Would you say you need curiosity?
Yeah, you do. You have to be at least curious enough to look at something and to try to see it differently.
Would you consider yourself a curious person?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
For anybody that's listening that may be curious about art or wanting to go into it, would you say that feeding your curiosity is a necessity to continue to develop the art?
I mean, I think so. I'm speaking from the way that I use art in my life, but I really truly walk through the day with the ideas I'm thinking about in my art, and I'm translating them through my work constantly. I can't separate the kind of like daily things that I do from the work that I make. They all blend together.
Being a filmmaker, has that had an impact on your relationships?
I think that maybe earlier on in my adulthood, it was definitely it had definitely become a little bit of an issue in some romantic relationships because I put just as much or more into my art than I did the relationship that I was in. But that's tempered as I get older, and it's I have a balance now, I think, but I also have a partner who really loves the way that I see the world and is a great conversationalist, and I work through a lot of ideas just in our kind of daily conversations that end up in end up in the work that I make. So I think that part has blurred a little bit too.
What can you thank COVID for?
Oh, at the beginning of COVID, at the risk of sounding super perverse, I found a lot of hope in it. I found hope in it because we were shaken up as a country, as a continent, as like the world. I was hopeful that it was the shakeup that we maybe needed to change some of the things that we had always kind of just seen as status quo. I mean, there were like countless examples. The opera put plants in the seats and played to the plants. Canada, all of a sudden, found $2,000 a month to help people get through. And, we're living in a world where all our Indigenous communities don't have clean drinking water, but all of a sudden we can find $2,000 a month. We have a social assistance that is incredibly low, but $2,000 a month was what most people needed to live on. And so, and the idea of caring from a distance, like being able to move through the world, caring for things without actually, actively being with them. And I just think there was a lot of ways that it could have shifted our perspective on things and changed the way we move forward. And then just Jeff Bezos became a quadrillionaire, and Amazon workers are still working under horrible conditions, and et cetera, et cetera. So my hope was quashed a little bit, but I think at the start it really showed that we can change the way that things are, and I think that we all need to. So that COVID gave me that little bit of hope at the start.
How do you support your mental health?
This has been a process, I think, since I was in my early 20s. I just surround myself with people that are into talking through things all the time.
Okay.
So I talk through things, if I'm feeling something uncomfortable, or I talk through it with a person or 5 people. And I think when you meet those things head on and they're just small, you can unravel them or recontextualize them and move on. So I think it's a daily, weekly, yearly process of just kind of dealing with things as they come in little doses.
It's not suppressing or denying. It's actually leaning in and using that curiosity to let's explore this and let's unpack it. Would you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever sought out professional therapy?
Yeah, when I was in my early 20s, I had just finished a gymnastics career and went to group therapy for an eating disorder. That was the best decision I could have made for myself, because I really saw how, I had interpreted the world around me, built an understanding of myself and the world, these rules around how to be. And then I watched myself slowly, undo those truths to the point where I was living and understanding myself and feeling myself in a very completely different way. And that was to understand the power of the mind and how it can create realities and then undo those realities. That was a really big lesson kind of in my early adulthood.
Do you believe that because of that therapy, that's why now you understand the value of talking and why you surround with other people so you can do that therapy talking?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was something that I guess a practice that built from my early 20s, and been doing that for 20 years for sure. Yeah. But now it's just, part of my life.
My sister had a very traumatic childhood, and there is deep trauma. What Krista is having to listen to and see are some pretty raw, painful experiences. And I'm sure that is opening up perspectives for you and seeing things in a different way than what you had seen. What drew you into my sister Samanda's story?
There are many answers to that question. I think it is time that we all take responsibility for those in our communities who do not have the same supports and the same options as we do. I grew up almost across the street from Samanda when I was a kid, albeit 20 years differently. We went to the same primary school, but I was offered hundreds or thousands more opportunities than Samanda was. And it's not because I am smarter or better. It's because, partially because I'm white for a big reason of that. And I just haven't had to deal with the things that Samanda has had to deal with. And I think that it's my responsibility now. I have a platform to extend that platform to Samanda. She's a poet. She writes beautiful poetry. It's from the heart. It's from her experience. It shows great resilience and strength, and it should be shared. She should have a platform to share that. So that is one kind of reason, a personal reason. Also, as I learned about Samanda, I learned about her through the executive director of Elizabeth Fry, who had been, working with her. As I learned about Samanda's story, she's captivating. She draws you in. She's funny. She will call me, and I know she has had a horrible week, and she will laugh. And it is straight up heartbreaking to know that she is in prison right now and could be there for a really long time. Yeah. So it's her. It's about my relationship to her. It's about my position in the world. All of those things, and working with Samanda is going to be challenging because these are really hard conversations we're having right now. How do we as white people uplift stories of people of color? I don't know if there's an answer. I don't know if I will have an answer at the end of the project. But I do know that I have a responsibility to her to make. I'm terrified about this project, truly. And I won't let that get in the way. It's a really challenging discussion right now, and nobody really knows how to, I think, do it properly. This allyship thing, there's no right way. There's no way that's going to be right for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think the same actions and the same gestures could be, needed by one person and could, be triggering to somebody else. And I don't know.
What terrifies you?
Of messing up, of doing this wrong, of hurting people. I think we often do things in the name of empathy. That doesn't mean you're not going to hurt somebody along the way. And so, so that part is scary. I want to do this. I want to move through this project conscientious as I can be about all of the considerations and gracious if I do mess up and move forward through it. But it's scary.
Are you uncomfortable because you're a white person bringing forth this story?
Yeah, I question my position in it for sure. She's changing my perspective on my relationship to these kind of systemic issues that her story brings up. And she's allowing me to see things that I haven't seen before. I have to sit back and listen to these opinions and take them into consideration. I think it's up to me to do the work to surround myself with a production team and a creative team and community consultants that can speak to the things that I can't, that can point out my blind spots, that can help me with challenging questions. Like, I'm creating animations for Samanda's poetry, and she has a history of interactions with men, abusive situations, and how I don't want to. Some of these men are Black, and I don't want to reinforce any stereotypes that are harmful to Black men. And then how do I tell Samanda's story and be true to her story as well, visually? And these questions I don't necessarily think are up for me to answer. They're for me to ask. It's a tricky conversation, but there has to be a way to move forward. I don't want to live in a world where I'm just making videos about white lesbians.
You understand from living in your own dynamics or how you've interpreted the world, where it's important to get other people's perspectives, especially those living in the actual situation. I appreciate that. I appreciate you seeking the resources to ask people tell me how this feels or explain to me how the culture is. So I have a better understanding and a better grasp of how to storytell, yet also not to dilute Samanda's truth. And that is a very challenging space to be in, because no matter what, there will be somebody's going to get offended, no matter what we do in the world. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. So I appreciate that every step that you're doing in this, you're very intentional of making sure that you are looking at all avenues to your best ability. We can only see what we are allowed to see, and you keep seeking outside of yourself other perspectives. In doing so, have there been things, biases that you didn't even realize you had that just have hit you in the face? And it's like, I never saw it that way.
I think that one of the biggest shifts for me since working with Samanda is that, when I first approached this project, I was like, I'm not a feature documentary filmmaker. I don't know how to tell stories about race. I am not Black. I don't know how, but I will try. This story isn't about me. How do I understand it? And as I said earlier, my work was really rooted in land and about my relationship with the land. I thought that's where, the environment, that is the kind of work that I do. And that was about understanding myself as connected to everything, my actions, my choices. And, we're all part of this ecological network. And I thought Samanda's project was different. Samanda has made me realize that it's not different. She's drawn those connections. I probably would have said, I don't have a relationship with the prison system. I don't know anything about the prison system. I don't know about criminal trials. In understanding her story, I've understood my position in relation to her story. I've understood my relationship to the institutions of power in a different way, in a way that all becomes an ecology too. The systems of power, the ways that we're connected to other people that we may not have ever thought of. So I think that she has made me see the way that we move through the world as an ecology as well, our power dynamics. And that was a big shift.
Right now, you're going through a lot of film festivals and having to do interviews. Now, could you share with the audience what that is about?
Yeah, so I have two projects that are going around to film festivals. One is the project that I had mentioned about, it's called Exercises in Being Close to You, a story for the Arctic Refuge. And it's kind of a hybrid experimental piece with a documentary. So it's the documentary of, my journey through the 2 weeks in the refuge to intercept the caribou migration. In the process, I'm trying to find the caribou and understand the space that I'm in. And then we don't see them till the last day. Intercut in this documentary, these gestures, these artistic gestures of trying to be close to something that you're not necessarily with. Because frankly, I don't know if we should be in the Arctic Refuge. I think we should leave it to the animals. We don't need it. So how do you care for something but not be there? Like, do we even need to be there? So that's one piece. And the other piece is called the Salt River Water Walk. It was a documentary of a water walk that I did that was led by Sharon. She's an Ojibwe community leader, artist, incredible person. And she leads these water walks. And basically, at the headwaters of a river, you collect a pail of water. The community of people that have come around walk in relay from the headwaters until the confluence of that river with another river, passing the water from person to person. You walk for, about a mile, caring for this water that you've orphaned, and then you pass it to the next person. And this repeats until you get to the confluence and return the water. And it was such a special experience, Natalie. We were complete strangers at the headwaters. We built community. Roles developed within the community as we walked. And it was, we all came together for the shared goal to care for the water. And I think people really felt the the connection to the water and the connection to the land that they were walking. We walked through Phoenix, which is a car city. There's, nobody walks in Phoenix. And we walked through it. We even crossed over freeways. Sharon had said to us, there's a eagle staff that walks behind the walkers to protect the walkers. And as if we got to, because you're not allowed to stop, you have to keep going like the river. And as we got up to the freeway, Sharon said, if you need to cross and you can't stop, so just stick the eagle staff out in front of traffic. It will protect you. And I am telling you, I lunged into traffic with this eagle staff, and cars in Phoenix slowed and stopped, and we walked across. It was incredible. Anyway, but that was a really special project about, I think, understanding yourself different in the world. And that is now traveling to different festivals this year.
Imagine you're 18. What are 3 words, only 3 words you would tell yourself?
Just 3? I would say accept your abject. And I would say that because as a teenager, I was so concerned about coming across as, perfect is such a cliche word, but we'll use it here. But I think that in the abject parts of ourselves, or the things we see as abject, there's a lot of wisdom. It's at the margins of what we call success in our culture. I think that when you sit in that place and you look around you, you just see things from a different perspective. And so I would say accept your abject.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Krista. I appreciate what you bring into the world, and the way that you do your storytelling is admirable, because you actually bring your living experiences out into the storytelling, and not many will do that. You actually are walking the walk that you're talking. And so I thank you for that. And I appreciate you. I hope later on, when the project, if it does come to fruition, that you'll come back and talk about the experience of going through the challenges, the knowledge, the aha moments, and the celebrations. So thank you for being here, Krista.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you for making it to the end. I appreciate you and your time. If you found any value in this conversation, I ask you to help us grow by subscribing to the Lift OneSelf podcast, and more, sharing it out to others. The more that we have conversation and dialogue that are honest and open, that is when we can remove the stigmas around mental health. Until next time, remember, be kind and gentle with yourself. You matter.